Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am Tahir Dhindsa and you're watching SDTV. Of late, the social protection has come up as a basic need. Society is going through turbulence, especially after the COVID in the last couple of years, after this economic crisis in Ukraine and whatnot. Social protection is the buzzword people are talking. What is social protection? How it should be enabled? Do we need a change in the policy? Or we need to enable policy which emphasize social protection? Or whatever the parameter is, just to know that we have invited today a guest with us who's very supple, and he has done his PhD in sociology from France, and Dr. Sohail Safdar. Very warm welcome. Just a few things I know about you. I think it's a long list, and I would bother you to tell us the other things. You have done PhD from France in sociology. You have established a couple of institutions from the scratch. You teach PhD students and introducing academics courses. Tell us a few things. Okay, what are you doing?
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I started my career in civil service in 1984 as a commerce and trade officer. But before that, I was deeply involved in academics even before. So once I came into service, I took my academics much more seriously, got my PhD, MPhil, postgraduate diploma in public administration from France, taught in French universities. And throughout my career, I have tried to blend the mainstream postings with training and research. So bringing in theoretical insights in policy development, in implementation. And in the process, I got the opportunity to establish the think tank of the Ministry of Commerce, that's the Pakistan Institute of Trade and Development. I was also the founding executive director of CPEC Center of Excellence. And on the government side, I was lucky to get many important assignments, like I was DG Trade Policy, Government of Pakistan. I was Pakistan's Economic Minister to EU in Brussels. I was member Governance Planning Commission. I was Special Secretary Cabinet once I got promoted to BS22. I was Dean, National School of Public Policy. I was member of Prime Minister Inquiry Commission on Debt, for example.
What are you doing right now? You are establishing a center or something?
Yeah, well, once I was kind of heading towards the retirement, I asked myself a question that should I go back to the government, or should I look back at my experience in the government, in policy development, and as an insider, I should do something in the outside where I could blend my insights into the policy development and implementation and combine it with the theory or theoretical insight and do something in terms of think tank activities. So I remember 3 years before, I collected all my friends and we decided to work on inequality. But then when the COVID hit in and within 2-3 weeks' time, the then Prime Minister was asking or telling people that we want to die with hunger or with disease. So that was a startling revelation that the social protections are so thin in the country that we were facing this stark choice. So along with the friends, we decided to focus more on the social protection, and we established Pakistan Alliance for Social Protection. And to support the alliance, we established the think tank by the name of Social Protection Resource Center. So I was the founding executive director with the motto to work for the universalization of minimum social protection to all by the state in all circumstances. But inequality or social protection both actually are windows or ways which take you to the heart of the matter, which is the social policy. That what is the social policy of the state and what is the social policy which is closer to the rights of the people. So that's where we are working these days.
Why social protection, universal social protection is so important? Or do you think, in the first place, do you think it's important for countries like Pakistan?
Well, depends that how do you define social protection. You have yourself said something very important, that social protection has become a buzzword. Now, we got onto the bandwagon of poverty reduction strategies 20, 30 years
because
before.
of the Amrita Sen.
That also is there. You see, I have huge respect for Dr. Sen. So he talks about the rights of people and entitlements that people should have. But what I'm referring to are the poverty reduction strategies, which were an extension of the trickle-down strategy that we got into this Washington consensus and pure growthmanship. So how do you take care of the equity? So to address equity in the wisdom of the people who introduced poverty reduction strategies in early 2000, we organized our social sector expenditure to reduce poverty, which is fine. Any country with the baggage of poverty needs to address the poverty. And then as the nomenclature globally changed from poverty towards social protection, we also adopted the term social protection, and particularly after we introduced the Benazir income support program, so income transfer social protection became mainstream in Pakistan also. There is a serious problem with that adoption of that name, but as this is only a name, I personally don't make a much issue about it. In any poor country, income transfers have their own place. But you cannot equate social protection with social policy. That is an important point, which in our work we want to emphasize that. And we invite the thinking people that, look, social protection is presenting itself as a panacea, as a problem for everything. And now almost all the applications of poverty reduction strategies have been applied and adopted there.
Just to provide a reference to our viewers, where are we now, right now? For example, I would like you to just comment very briefly on the phases. We were just discussing with you as well. The 4 phases which are usually taken as in 1959, the first 5-year plan, that was a huge success. Other countries was very envious. They came here to what there is, and the development, most of the development, goes back to that. Then 1973, it was nationalization, and everything that the private sector was doing, that was nationalized. Then in early 80s, denationalization. Then I'm a witness as a journalist. There's these regulatory institutions start springing up. Like there was a mushroom growth of NEPRA and PTA and so many others, oil and gas regulatory authorities and market liberalization. Where are we now exactly at this stage? What stage is this?
Very good. Thank you very much for helping my analysis by talking about these 4 inflection points that you have talked. Starting from your last question, that where are we now? We are nowhere now.
We are nowhere. In the middle of nowhere. Is there any reference?
In this sense, you see, let's talk about the morality of the state. Pakistan was made in a context where this aspect of the socio-cultural rights of the people, citizens of the newly established country were paramount, and Pakistan state was expected to respond to those expectations. Now, that's where the morality of state of Pakistan is coming from. And from 1947 to roughly, you can say 1953, we had great people who established the state which did not exist. So, wonderful job done. And once a proper state was in place, its own state bank and some accumulation, its policy was there. Then was the time for development planning in the long term and responding to the long-term needs of the people. And we know that Pakistan was made of such frontier regions of Indian colonial empire, British colonial empire, that were rather poor and marginalized. So in 1955, we came up with the first 5-year plan, and the state took responsibility of industrializing the country on its own self. So it was a classical development state, helped by the international partners also. And we did very well, as you have yourself said, that people were envious of our experience. Then late 60s, early 70s, we adopted or effected a transformation, and we adopted a socialist model of state by nationalizing industry, financial, banking sector. That was one part of it, which was called corrective at that time. But more importantly, this is the period that from 1966, when we first introduced the first law of social security in Pakistan, the social security institution, the tripartite process. Then we had the law on workers' welfare. Then we had the old age benefit institution. So in these 10 years, from 1966 to 1976, we laid down the foundation of the social security infrastructure to respond to those aspirations. And that was the heart of the morality of the state. Now, one can separately discuss on the merits of nationalization and on the merits of denationalization. But what happened is that once we denationalized in early 80s and depended or put our trust in the private sector for the growth of the country, we stopped the process of the evolution of the social security institutions, which should not have stopped. So we started neglecting the tripartite process, and with the pure growthmanship of 80s and 90s, we continued. Pakistan did progress also, but we created new new generation of structural problems in terms of a discord between the growth and the equity. And with
growth and distribution.
You can say distribution, equity, equality, the different ways to look at it. But we introduced the regulatory state in this hope that with effective regulation, we would be able to give a new direction to the economy, and the private sector would become more dynamic, and the state withdrew from the provision of basic services even. So that experiment continued, did not deliver, as we all know. And by 2008-9, when we had the global financial crisis, which Pakistan was not deeply impacted, but globally there were a lot of impacts, and a lot of countries introduced income support programs. So that was the first major intervention after the period of 1966 to 76 that we had another social policy intervention, you can say. The real problem with this intervention was that it responded to the lack of trickle down, and it was not connected with the social security institution we already had. So we made two silos. One was these traditional social security institution. The other was an income support program. Now, what happens, what is the implication of this important disconnect is that if you do not connect them both, then the trickle down, which had not happened, which you try to respond by income support, that actually results in a kind of an apartheid that you identify the lower 15-20% of the ultra poor and start giving them the monthly support which they need, but you then consign them to a permanent state of exclusion, which is politically usable also. Once you give aid to people as a charity, then you expect them to vote for themselves also. So this disconnect has been a major problem in the country, and we continued with the income support program. Now here comes the current contemporary period. In 2018, the then Prime Minister, in his acceptance speech, talked about the right to development of the citizens and talked about Riyasat-e-Madina. Now, some people believe
are they synonymous?
That's where the real issue is, or the challenge is, that apparently the state adopted this morality, which was symbolized or expressed through the term Riyasat-e-Medina. So their task was to walk the talk of the right to development by taking the principles of Riyasat-e-Medina and applying them on today's world. But that did not happen.
Right. I think it's a very interesting topic, and I personally believe, according to my experience, most of the road accident do not happen because of mistakes or the bad road, but because of the loss of orientation on the road of the driver. So it is very important that the orientation, especially on the policy, should be correct, and that needs a reference like on road, lane discipline and all. So that's why I was asking you where you're. I think we should do more programming on that. So clearly and very explicitly in a framework, just to have more thought on that. With this, we come to the end of the program, and we are looking forward to bring you more programming on that. And I think it's very important because in the end, it's the social sector. Everything in the end is social. After fighting a war, you need to socialize and sit across the table and talk it over and develop a framework. The basic Bretton Woods framework and the Washington consensus, obviously, that was a social process that embeds economic process as well. With this, we come to the end of the program.